In this episode of the Macworld Podcast, we're taking a look at the year in review for Apple. What were the biggest products, events, and happenings that were landmarks in 2024 for the company? Stay tuned and find out. Welcome to the Macworld Podcast. I'm Roman Loyola here with Jason Cross.
Good morning.
And Michael Simon.
Hello, sir.
2024 is winding down. So on this show, we're going to take a look back at the year for Apple. We're going to cover particular product category sets like iPhones, Macs, etc. But in a general sense, would you guys say this was a good year for Apple?
Yeah, I mean, good certainly. I would say it trends toward great. They updated basically everything. There's a couple of products. 10th gen iPad wasn't updated. Mac Pro, Mac Studio weren't updated. That's it. Oh, iPhone SE also that's coming next year. But otherwise,
some accessory stuff is a little
HomePod and stuff. Right. But otherwise, big updates for the iPad Pro, M4 chip. Mac Mini, of course, got a massive upgrade. Apple Intelligence came around. Vision Pro arrived. Now, did any of it really make a huge impact right now? I mean, there's varying levels of that, but it sets them up for the future in a real big way.
We're not looking at anything and going, oh, they released this product that's going to get all this new market share or, whatever, anything like that. But they did the updates we saw to products were really significant. I feel like it's mostly a good year. I think it's less a good year for new product launches. The only real significant thing was Vision Pro, which even with limited expectations kind of didn't do as well as expected. We'll get into that.
We'll get into that. So possibly the marquee item from Apple this year, at least from a marketing standpoint. I don't know if it is from a practical standpoint. We're going to get into that. Is Apple Intelligence.
I mean, if you go to their website, it's on the home screen 12 times or something like
that.
It's
in every ad. It's everything.
Apple wants you to think that 2024 is the year of Apple Intelligence.
And that kind of is the most significant user experience thing. And it goes across many product lines. They not all their accessory stuff and everything, but it goes iPhone, iPad, Mac. I mean, it's a fairly big deal, even if it's kind of limited. It's kind of coming out in pieces. Just today, we're getting the piece that gives you all the image generation stuff, and they still don't have the smarter Siri and blah, blah, blah. But as a direction for the company, it's a huge deal.
And they were really kind of taken to task last year when they didn't do any AI whatsoever, and all the companies around them, Google and obviously ChatGPT and all the, AI was the thing. And Apple was noticeably absent from that whole conversation. And this really puts them in it in a big way. Now, as Jason says, the practical uses and the rollout, it's all very kind of clunky and messy right now. But all the pieces are finally in place for Apple to really make a splash in the AI realm.
Apple Intelligence as a brand for Apple's own AI efforts will be, and stuff that's integrated, will be a big part of next WWDC with even new things then. And they'll be in iOS 19 staged rollouts of additional new AI features. This is just going to be a part of how you use your Apple products from here on out.
Right. Yeah, right. Even if it doesn't become the big thing that we think it might, or Apple does, it's here to stay in the sense that these features, this Apple Intelligence thing, because it's built into all of its products and the OSs, it's gonna be here for forever, I guess. I mean, it's not like we're gonna wake up one day and Apple Intelligence is gone. It might not be quite as heavily marketed, but it'll still be there.
And it's not like a single app or service like Apple Music or something like that, where you can just ignore it and do something else or whatever. It's throughout the product. It's at an OS level, foundational throughout the product. I think, unfortunately for Apple, I mean, they clearly were rushing to do this. It was clearly a hurried thing to say, like, let's scrap the car project and put everybody on AI and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of rolling out in pieces. And the piece that they need the most is coming last. It's coming next year, spring, because everybody thinks of Apple's AI effort as Siri. And they made Siri look different.
AI in general, that's what you hear. ChatGPT is a chatbot. Gemini is a chatbot. Like you want to talk to these things.
I think you talk to and it talks back to you, or it does a thing, or it gives you an answer. And ChatGPT integration in Siri is really useful and smart, but it's hopping over to ChatGPT.
Right, it's another service.
The main thing that Siri's going to do this spring, two main things. One is it's going to look at all your contacts and messages and all that other stuff on your phone and kind of understand you and your family and stuff like that. So it will understand something like who your mom is. Say, do this with my mom or whatever. And the other thing it will do is they're going to have a whole mess of what they call app intents, which are all these sort of framework hooks that developers can use within their apps to let Siri do something within the app. Right now, there's very, very few. There's just for like music and a few other timers and stuff like that, a few other things. They're going to have a whole bunch for third parties, hundreds of third-party apps. So you're going to be able to tell Siri to do something, and it will be able to do it within an app. You will be able to tell it to do a task, and it will put it on your task management app or something. So all of that together is going to make Apple Intelligence seem smart, because that's the part of it that people think of as AI, much more than creating a really bad image with the image playground tool or something, right?
Apple released some new features to go with Apple Intelligence today.
Yeah, there's the two big things are image generation and ChatGPT integration. So image generation is there's an app called Image Playground that lets you take pictures from your people from your photos collection if you want, and backgrounds and objects and stuff, and makes simple descriptions, and it generates a little image in either an animation style, meaning like CG animation style, or sketch style. But that, and it's actually kind of bad. It does it all on your device, which is neat, but it's like the quality level is like 2 years ago every image generation tool you've seen. It's like what's the one that everybody used to use a couple of years ago?
Dolly was the big one.
No, the other one, Midjourney. It was like Midjourney 2.
Yeah, okay.
It's like a Midjourney 2 level like thing. It's not great. But that framework is also used in Notes you can like draw a sketch with your Apple Pencil and then just like circle it, and it will turn that sketch into like a real image with that. Or just use context around it to insert an image. That's better. There's Genmoji, which also uses that same thing in the emoji picker to make a custom emoji in the emoji style. And that's pretty good. That's like hit or miss, but it gives you several to pick from, and that works better. That's that part of it. The other part is ChatGPT being integrated is in the writing tools. Instead of just selecting text and modifying it, you can tell ChatGPT to generate text, give it the prompt, and have it spit out new text for you. And of course, it's integrated into Siri, where if you ask Siri a question, it doesn't know because it's like sort of general world knowledge thing. It can ask permission to say, hey, do you want me to ask ChatGPT? And it'll ask ChatGPT. And that includes sending an image, sending a screenshot. If you're asking about something on the screen, it will ask permission to send that image to ChatGPT and get the answer. And that will give you a much, much better answer than Siri usually does. But of course, that's not all on your device. It's not all online. It's more private. They have their deal with ChatGPT is it's just that one prompt. It's anonymized. It's not tied to your account. But you can log into ChatGPT if you have an account. You don't have to. And then you can get as many requests a day as you want, and it will be in your ChatGPT history and all that. But you don't have to do any of that. And if you don't do any of that, it's much more anonymous than ChatGPT usually is.
So we have information on the new features on our website at macworld.com. So check out those articles if you want more information. You can get the updates now through your devices. It's on iOS, Mac OS, iPad OS. So you should be able to get those online
TVOS,
as well.
Watch OS, Vision OS. It's all
the OSs. People will mostly use these Apple Intelligence features probably on their iPhones. We got the iPhone 16 this year. So what do you guys think of the iPhone releases this year?
The non-Pro version is better than it's ever been. It has it brings you closer to Pro than ever, and it's harder and harder to justify the Pro. There were no major like design changes or anything like that. Nothing. It feels like iPhone 15 Part 2 in a lot of ways, right? It's not a massive improvement. Their history of skimping on RAM kind of bit them, where Apple Intelligence is really only for these new phones.
Mm-hmm.
And camera control was like a nice. We all thought it was a nice idea that doesn't always work the way you want it to. You've got to go in and tweak some stuff and change some settings so that you don't accidentally use it the wrong way. Like swiping on it didn't work well. I should mention that the update that just came out today that we spoke about does add a thing for the camera control button on those iPhone 16s where you press and hold it and this thing called visual intelligence pops up that gives you AI on whatever you point your screen at. And it's actually very cool. It actually works really neat. You should try it.
Yeah, and that's probably the reason why they brought it to all four phones, because it's a feature that they want out there. That I agree with Jason. That's really the main reason to use camera control. I don't love it as a controller for the camera. Like, it's okay. It's not necessary. It kind of adds another layer of a little bit of confusion at times. At best, it's the same level of simplicity in taking pictures. At worst, it makes you miss something because you're spending an extra second fiddling with something that you really shouldn't have to.
I use mine strictly to launch the camera and as a shutter, and I've turned off its ability to do any other control because I find myself accidentally using them wrong when I don't mean to. So I've used the settings and stuff to make mine launch the camera and shutter and nothing else, and at that it does a good job.
Yeah, I thought I was going to like it. And then as time went by, I found myself accidentally using it too often. It turns out the way I hold my phone is right where camera control is. And so I ended up, turning it off completely because I thought even just, I think it's a double press you can use to launch camera. You can adjust the setting on how camera control launches the camera. And the settings just didn't work for me because of the way I hold my phone. So I ended up just turning it off.
Yeah, I mean, the iPhone 16 and 16 Plus didn't increase in price. They jumped 2 processor generations. They got better cameras, more twice the RAM to run Apple Intelligence. They still don't have an always on display. They're still missing the telephoto camera. Like, there are pro features that they don't have. But for a couple $100 less, I bought the Plus. So I went from a Pro Max to a Plus just to see if I really noticed it, and I do. I mean, I miss some features about it, mainly the always on display, but
that's the main one.
It's for $200 less. It's a really, really good phone, or $300 less. It's a really good phone, and one that I would absolutely recommend more so than I would have this time last year for the iPhone 15 and iPhone 15 Pro models.
Yeah, you have to really want that 5x telephoto and the always on display. Because that's mainly what you're paying for, unless you're like really on the top edge of I want to shoot in hybrid log gamma video all the time.
Yeah.
So, in which case you're not even making that decision. You're just getting the Pro model.
Right. And there are a lot of people that want the very, very best of everything, even if they aren't, super high end photographers. And I get it. Like the Pro, there's nothing wrong with getting a Pro phone. They're excellent. But if you don't want to spend 4 figures on a phone, this is the non-Pro models this year aren't really sacrificing much.
They're a lot lighter too, which is nice.
Yeah.
I would almost venture to say that this was the year for the iPad. Only because...
Well, literally, in the sense that every single model got updated, and they didn't last year at all. None of them.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the thing about saying it's the year for the iPad, because Apple had taken its time updating them.
Yes.
So there was kind of this oh, finally it's here. But the iPad Pro came out. It got the M4 processor before the Macs did, which I think kind of surprised a lot or
Yeah. They got real skinny.
They got real skinny.
5 millimeters, 5.1 millimeters, and 5.4 or 5.3 for the 11-inch.
Just looking at the
thin.
thickness, it doesn't make you appreciate how thin it is.
That's true.
When it's when something's 11-inch big or whatever, the size of a sheet of paper, and it's a little bit thinner, it really feels super thin. It's like this crazy thing.
Yeah,
it makes the camera bumps more noticeable.
Yeah,
sure. Yeah, when you hold it and use it, particularly the 13-inch model, it's incredibly thin, to the point where you're afraid you're gonna crack it in half.
Right? Yeah, it feels yes.
Yeah,
fragile almost.
It's pretty incredible how you get an OLED screen, you get an M4 processor, you get 256 gigs of storage, cellular networking, all these things, like the cameras, FaceTime, all the things that you have in this package. That is, it's astounding. iPad still has its issues with, what are we really supposed to use it for?
Yeah, the software stuff is still
unmatched.
Yeah. Well, Apple kind of took a few steps towards defining what at least the iPad Pro is when they released Final Cut and Logic for the iPad to kind of give professionals an update to the tools that they use, and then they have released a Final Cut camera that works with the iPad. So they definitely want to use the iPad Pro as, I guess, in certain instances, a replacement for your laptop.
It depends on what you use your laptop for.
Yeah,
that's always been the question.
I still think fundamentally iPad OS feels like iOS on a big screen.
Yeah, for sure.
To its detriment, too much so. They split out the names a long time ago, but it still gets updated with iOS all the time. Has all the exact same. It just still feels like big screen iOS, and it does need to find a way to look and feel and act different in a way that the big screen makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Not 6 different ways to. I almost wanted to say screen time, not screen time. The new multitasking Stage Manager. Stage Manager was a good idea, a good stab at doing that. It wasn't very well fleshed out, but it was a good idea to say, look, okay, here's a new way to multitask and everything. They need that idea, but fleshed out and just one thing, and it needs to work a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same criticisms we've had for years. It's they're always right on the edge of figuring it out. And they never quite get there. Like Magic Keyboard, so they redesigned the Magic Keyboard. It's gorgeous, metal. It's as backlit keyboard. It really feels like a laptop. But when you sit down to do work, I still go to my MacBook. I'd rather work on my MacBook than my iPad, even though the iPad is nicer, more portable. There's a lot of great things there, but it just can't match the multitasking and the versatility of my Mac.
Yeah, I think that's one of the frustrating things is we've got another year where we kind of hope that iPad OS would be more robust, and it still hasn't quite happened.
Yeah. So it's kind of the same, not the same as every year, more so than every year. It's we're looking at the hardware and going they did a great job updating the hardware this year. And the software it's not a problem. Nothing's wrong with all this new iPad OS 18 stuff and Apple Intelligence, all this, but it still isn't distinct from the iPhone enough.
Right. And the other issue is that there's a Pro, there's an Air, there's a Mini, there's a standard iPad.
There's too many iPads.
Yeah,
way too
right.
many
So
iPads.
there's arguably more iPad lines than Mac lines, and they all run the same software. They all do the same stuff. The difference between the iPad Pro M4 and the iPad 10th Gen A15 isn't that much, and it's hard to justify spending $1,300 and up on again, a gorgeous piece of technology. It's miraculous when you look at it. It's I wrote an article a few months ago, like, it's impossible to think that they made this thing. But what are we supposed to do with it? Like, why am I supposed to spend $1,300, $1,500, $2,000 on this
there's still a regular iPad, a Mini, two sizes of Airs, two sizes of Pros.
And they all basically do the same thing.
And multiple different keyboards and multiple different pencils. And this one works with that thing and that thing works with this thing. And it all needs to get simpler and more distinct from Apple's
distinct is the big one, yeah.
On the Mac side, we started off with the M3 MacBook Air in the spring. That was a good way to start. And then we kind of had this lull.
Yeah, great product.
Yeah. And then we had this lull until November when the M4 Macs were released. So the Mac year kind of ended on a high note. But
this is the second year in a row they've done that. So it seems like this is maybe the cadence. MacBook Air in the spring, Pros and desktop in the fall. We'll see.
No, I wouldn't say Pros and desktop, like MacBook Pros and some
Studio
desktop,
and Pro didn't come out. Yep.
They didn't come out, and when they do, I think they're going to be a spring release.
Maybe so, yeah.
Like they were before. So I think maybe those come in the spring, the Studios. Yeah, that's because the Studios were kind of the Studio and the Mac Pro, which who knows what they're going to do with the Mac Pro at this point. Are they just going to update the processor or something? I don't know. I'm looking at the Mac Studio going, why is there a Mac Pro? That update, those maybe update in the spring. That's the only thing we're missing this year. We got everything else got an update, and they're good updates. And the Mac Mini is a verifiable hit. Like, people love it.
It's awesome.
It's way better. It's smaller. It's more mini. It's more like a mini computer.
Yeah.
Performance is great. In all the Macs, they solved their 8 GB problem. They still have a problem with what it costs to get any other RAM upgrade or storage upgrade.
Yeah.
But they all start with 16 now, which is where they've really needed to be for the prices they charge. And so, they
even really updated the MacBook Air, which for half the year or 3/4 of the year had 8 gigs of RAM. They updated all of those, 15 to 13, all the models, and didn't increase the price, which is fairly shocking for Apple. To give us more for the same price, is it what you usually get? They could have left them at 8 gigs until next year when they update the Air. They didn't. And that makes so that even the M2 model, so the M2 has 16 gigs of RAM, a very good processor, the new design. And in Amazon, you can get it for like $800, $750 sometimes even. That's a killer deal for what you're getting. That was $1,200 like a year ago. Not even a year ago, 8 months ago.
We also got some new AirPods. We got the AirPods 4 with and without active noise cancellation. So there are two different models at two different price points. And then we got the hearing aid support in the AirPods Pro 2. So you have to have the AirPods Pro 2. And then we got a USB update on the AirPods Max.
Yeah.
Not a great year for AirPods.
Well, AirPods 4 are good.
AirPods 4 are good. It's a great replacement they replaced the old AirPods 2 that they were still selling.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a great replacement for that. And the version with active noise canceling, they're just not very on sale right now, but as soon as they are, it'll be a really great thing. The real star of the show, I think, has been that AirPods Pro 2 keep getting way better. Like, they keep kicking out software updates that does awesome stuff. Like the hearing test is really cool. The hearing aid feature, even if you don't use hearing aid feature, doing the hearing test and then just turning on, hey, adjust my sound quality to match my hearing test, works really, really good. They keep improving things like the way that noise canceling, the adaptive noise canceling and stuff like that. That it's been a star product. AirPods Pro 2 has been like really good, and they keep making it. It's not a this year product, but the software updates are, and they keep getting other accessories. No Apple TV stuff this year, hardware wise. Not that it needs anything except for what are they going to do with Apple Intelligence on Apple TV, right? They need that. They need a version that runs some sort of Apple Intelligence, and then to figure out what it should do on a TV that makes sense for the TV. But HomePods is the other big. It's kind of left behind in terms of it doesn't run Apple Intelligence. It's not going to run the new. When you get your new Siri on your phone this spring that does all this stuff, it's not going to do that. It's going to kind of run old Siri.
Yeah, HomePod's 4 years old. HomePod Mini, rather, is 4 years old.
Yeah.
And so earlier this year, I forget, maybe June or something, I forget, but they launched a new color, a slightly different color from Space Back to Midnight, which is just like, whenever Apple does it, it's the same thing with the AirPods Max. Like, you wait all this time and you get like the most minor of updates that does two things. One, it just infuriates you because they didn't update anything else, but it also sends a signal that we're not going to do much with this for a little while.
Yeah.
And like, listen, HomePod Mini for $100 is great. Considering it's like the same price as like an iPhone case. Like, it's excellent. It's a great value. It's a great little thing. I have 2 of them connected to my Mac as speakers. It's fantastic, but it's 4 years old, and it doesn't run Apple Intelligence, as Jason said. There are things that Apple could do to make it better, and it doesn't seem as though they're going to really bother much with HomePod for a little while, unless, and we'll talk about this next week, we get this new, like a new series of devices that have screens and stuff. But that's another conversation.
That's next week's show. But I think there's probably some stuff they could be doing to make it, to make it run Apple Intelligence stuff on your phone, to process your request. If your phone is around, you making the request, it will say, okay, I'm going to send that request to your phone, get my Apple Intelligence answer or perform the function, do the things within your apps, whatever. So to work kind of like it could already recognize who's talking, right? Like if you have a multi-user home. So to just kind of go, okay, I know who that is. I'm going to do that on their phone. It needs to do kind of that kind of thing. And there's doesn't seem to be any indication that they're going in that direction.
Yeah. And maybe that's coming with, I don't know, Apple Intelligence 2. I don't know how they market that.
Yeah. Maybe, who knows?
But yeah, right now, like, HomePod is, like, again, really good, but old and in real need of kind of getting up to speed with the rest of Apple's products.
Are we calling Apple Watch its own category, or are we calling that an accessory as well?
I was going to call it its own category. So,
I think it's its own thing.
So we got the Series 10 and the Ultra. Oh, wait. No, we got updates.
We got the Black Ultra. That was it.
Yeah. Right. That's what it was. Yeah.
Which also costs $100 more, but you get a different band.
Yeah. And I don't know about you guys, but I was a little disappointed because I was kind of hoping that Apple would do something big because it's the 10.
Yeah. What's funny is that during the I forgot the name of the event, but during the event, the iPhone event that they released it, they had this intro that was like this all new design, and then they show it on the screen. It's like, but that's the same design.
It's the same.
Like, what's new about it? It's a little bit thinner. The bezels are a little bit thicker, and it's a little bit bigger. The screen's a little bit bigger. That's it.
Yeah, it's a 1 millimeter larger display, which they made to sound like it's a huge. It's not that much bigger.
No,
it's just barely.
It's barely noticeable.
It's thinner, but it is, again, barely thinner. You won't notice a lot. The main thing is like, the display looks better at an angle than it used to.
Okay.
Got a water temperature sensor like that. I mean, that's it. It's what you got. That's what it is. So,
and again, that's not to disparage the Apple. The Apple Watch is great, and it's the same price as last year. And if you're buying a new one, then you get some new stuff. But to bill it as this new thing, it's the same watch.
It's the same watch, which not a problem. But and it's very, it really, really is like a Series 9. The Series 10 is very Series 9.
Series 9A or whatever you want to call it. Series 9.5.
Yeah. The main, of all the things they added, the thing that I have noticed the difference of the most is the faster charging.
And there was also the whole Massimo lawsuit thing this past year. So
yes, we still have lost our blood oxygen sensor.
New watches, including all of the Series 10 models, have a blood oxygen sensor, but it's turned off because there was a lawsuit by a company named Massimo, and it's over a patent dispute. And rather than figure out payment, which was probably astronomical in Apple's defense, Apple just said, well, screw it. We're just going to take it away.
I think Massimo asked for something like $20 per watch sold.
No, I'm sure it was outrageous. Yeah.
But yeah, they're still fighting. They're still working out through that lawsuit. And then when it's finished, whether Apple wins or if they lose and decide to license or whatever, they can pump out a software update and just flip the switch and turn it on.
In a second. Yeah.
In a second.
Yeah.
And if you bought one before that, obviously it still works. It's the models after. Like they didn't send out a software update to nuke it from existing models. They just couldn't sell anymore. And that was earlier, I think January of this year. So most of the watches sold in 2024.
Almost every Series 9 you would buy, and then all the Series 10s have it. And I think it's not everywhere. I think it's in the United States, and it might be in the EU as well. But in other places it works.
Speaking of litigation, here's a challenge for you, Jason. Can you briefly summarize all the kind of the EU stuff that's happening with Apple that happened in the past year and some of the things that with the iOS updates that Apple released that kind of, I don't know if mitigates the right word.
I'm going to go take a nap while Jason does this. I'll be back.
I will try to be real brief about it. So there's one thing is that Apple is sort of throughout this last year, we saw them start to comply with the EU's regulations around charging ports and stuff. That's why we have USB-C on everything and Lightning's going. It's mostly because the EU told them to. Also, USB-C is just better, and Apple's one of the inventors of it, and I don't know what took them so long. That's one thing. The other thing on the software side is the EU had determined that on iPhone, Apple is a gatekeeper, which means that it has to allow things like other app stores, other payment methods, and stuff like that. So in the EU specifically, and only in the EU, which means if you're in the UK, thanks to Brexit, it's not you. I mentioned that because we're English language, and so we've got that's like half our audience is people in the UK. Yeah. It's not you, but you can load other app stores. You can download apps directly from the internet and stuff. And then there's this ongoing fight about like Apple invented a ton of rules to make it extremely hard to do all of this stuff. Like these really high level bars to jump through. If you want to put your app on the phone, put your app on a website for somebody to download stuff, you have to have already had an account, a developer account in the App Store for like 2 years with all these millions of downloads and all this other stuff. So there's still ongoing fights back and forth about is Apple complying or not. But the gist of it is that in the EU, you have essentially what we and some others have called a better iOS that allows you the option, if you want it, to use other app stores or download apps from other places or have payment options with apps that are not Apple Pay or not direct through Apple's in-app purchases to make it like you do with every in-app purchase for a physical good or service, Uber, Walmart, Amazon, anything else. Just use your credit card. You can do that with other in-app purchases. That's the short version. It's a whole podcast and a half to go through all of it.
Bravo, Jason. That was a very good job. But a lot of that happened this past year, and here in the United States, we didn't.
Yeah, that was a very 2024 event. Started mostly in the first half of the year when those OS updates came out. That they were down to the wire. They were like, you have to have it by this date to be in compliance with it, and they released it like the day before or something. The OS update. They were not giving them an inch.
I thought we would end talking about the Vision Pro.
Yeah, because that was the first launch of the year.
Yeah. And the first major new category. It almost feels like a last year thing because they announced it last year, and the result of buzz was last year. Right. But it was released this February, and it's the first new product.
I think there was a perception at the beginning of the year that 2024 was going to be the year of Vision Pro.
Yeah.
But then Apple had to pivot and kind of went.
Well, I mean, I don't know how.
Or did they have to pivot?
A lot of that is our own, and by our, I just mean like the tech press at large.
Right.
Like when Apple does something, it's usually a big deal. A $3,500 headset was always a tough sell. Always. Even if it had like a bunch of things that we had to do. So there's two problems. One, it's ridiculously expensive. And two, it doesn't really have like a full purpose yet. But if you go do that demo, assuming you didn't buy one, because I didn't. But if you go do that demo in the Apple store, man, it is mind-blowing what it's able to do.
Yeah, they didn't learn anything from AirPods Max, and they made it all metal and too heavy. Like they're just so opposed to plastic that they couldn't help themselves. So the weight distribution's wrong, and it's kind of too heavy. It's super, super, super expensive, and that would have been okay if it was like, wow, you can't do any of this stuff with any other Apple product. But at best, it does things you can do with other Apple products, just kind of with pinching and looking and zooming.
Yeah, in a different way. Yeah,
in a kind of different way. It's there's still not that level of that fundamental level. It was always going to be a slow burn, but they also didn't advertise it to consumers. It took a long time to be available anywhere outside the U.S. Given all that, it still, I think, is a disappointment. I think they didn't improve the software fast enough. It's still not on a fast enough track. It doesn't have Apple Intelligence. It doesn't have all these things.
Right.
It's just kind of behind. And doesn't seem like it's a great solo movie watching experience, but it just doesn't seem like it's ever going to be I wouldn't say a hit, but I don't know if it's ever going to sell like 1 million units. Overall, total, maybe 1 million total.
Yeah, they're going to have to update it. They're going to have to lower the price till I think at least $19.99 to get a serious level of people running out to buy it. And I think it has to work outside. Like, and that's not a knock against Vision Pro.
Yeah.
But when you're putting on a pair of glasses or, goggle, like you expect to be able to walk around, it's not really a moving around thing. It's an in-house, in-room maybe thing. And listen, VR isn't. But people don't like VR isn't a thing that people really do. Gamers do it, and it's a niche thing. I think when people saw Vision Pro demoed at WWDC last year and saw all the news reports on it, they thought it would be a thing you could just put on and walk around with, and it's really not.
Yeah, the augmented reality is meant to be that way, and it's kind of half augmented reality because it does this pass-through thing, which isn't as good as it needs to be, and just like a whole bunch of things. But yeah, it doesn't have any kind of cellular connection. It needs to be online. Get a Wi-Fi problem. It does technically work moving around, but it's not built for it. Like app windows don't follow you around. They get anchored to a place. So as you move, it screws up the whole experience and stuff. Like it's just really not meant for that. You're gonna have to change a lot. Vision OS 3 is gonna have to be a big improvement, and then on top of it, and a whole bunch of great new apps and experiences that really are not just neat, but actually useful.
Yeah.
Like, oh man, I could never do this on my Mac. Oh man, I could never do this on my iPhone. Like, other than just looking cool. And then, as you said, that plus some version that costs half as much, which would still be an expensive product. Half as much is still like twice what an iPhone costs. Like, it's still a lot.
Right. Yeah, and like those aren't easy things. Like we're sitting here.
No, it's way hard.
Like, we're not developing this stuff. We're not engineers.
Yep.
Yeah.
So like I'm not even like it's not even a criticism. Like Vision Pro is awesome. And I would recommend anyone to go try one. Check it out. Because it's really it's quite spectacular when you put it on and you're in that world. But like it's just not the kind of thing. Even if someone gave you $3,500 and said you have to spend it at the Apple Store, like get a Mac and an iPad. Like it's just not something that I think you're going to use to justify the cost.
Yeah, I hesitate to call it a flop, but it's almost like because it does do a lot. But just like in terms of like keeping the buzz going, keeping people excited about it, even if it doesn't sell well, they just haven't been able to do that. I have the one that I have what you said. The company gave me money to buy one so that we could review it and stuff. And I have it and I almost never use it. Like when some new update comes out, I do it, I try it and I go, oh, that's neat. But it's never more practical than doing the same thing some other way.
Right.
It's always a slower, more clunky way with, the thing on my face and all that. Like I never really feel compelled to go use it because it's like, well, I've got to. It's the only way I can do this so much easier or better. So it's just not there.
Right. A few months ago, Meta did this tech demo. It's not really a product yet. Where you had actual wearable AR glasses. And in all the coverage of it, from what I noticed, Apple wasn't mentioned in it at all. It's like this, even though this product that Meta was showing wasn't a shipping product, it showed what they were working on and what they were capable of. And so it was just kind of like Jason was just used a metaphor, it's Apple's in it for a slow burn. They're in it for the long haul. But they also got to do stuff to keep that flame going.
I'm sure Apple could show us a demo of some
that's not their
future
style.
product that would blow. But that's not what Apple does. And we're never going to get like, here's a sneak peek at something coming out in 2032. Like they're just not going to do that.
Like Meta's those AR glasses they showed. They said these cost $10,000 each to make, and we're never going to sell these.
Right.
This is made for us to. This is our step toward making the consumer device, and just to show what we're working on and we're capable of. It's to get developers excited and working and figure out what the interaction model looks like and all that. But it was something you could use and try. And it was spectacular because they're real glasses that you look through at the real world. Not with a big head thing on like HoloLens, like glasses. They're just like fat, like the glasses Michael's wearing right now, like thicker. And that's great. And Apple will never, if they had that, they would never show it to you.
Right. And I'm sure they do.
Years.
I'm sure they have several of them.
Yeah,
but they're just not. It's not ready yet. It's just not. And in a large part, that's what Vision Pro is. The closest we're going to get to Apple releasing a polished prototype that's really not ready to be shown yet. But they have to get it out there because they need people to use it. They need to get the name out there. They need to get the technology out there. I don't think Apple expected to sell many of them at all. Like I don't think that they were disappointed in how Vision Pro sold. But I will agree with Jason that the buzz was very short-lived and gone and hasn't returned in even a small bit. Like they do need to keep it. They need to keep people wanting one, and that's not there.
And it's got to be more than sticking out a press release saying that Vision OS 2 supports widescreen monitor thing on your thing. It's that you've got to do more than that.
Well, that does it for this episode of the Macworld Podcast, episode 913. Thanks to Jason Cross.
Thank you.
Thanks to Michael Simon.
Thank you, sir.
And thanks to you, the audience. Thank you for tuning in. You can subscribe to the Macworld Podcast in the podcast app, on Spotify, on YouTube at the Macworld Podcast channel, or through any other podcast app. Do you have any comments or questions? Send us an email at podcast@macworld.com, or contact us through Blue Sky, that's at macworld.com, on X, that's at Macworld, on Threads, that's at Macworld_HQ, or on the Macworld Facebook page. Join us in the next episode of the Macworld Podcast as we talk about the latest in the world of Apple. See you next time. Oh, hey, Mike. So I wanted to ask you: are you a proponent of the golden at bat?
Not in the slightest. That's the craziest, dumbest rule I've ever heard of in my life.
They're not going to do that. He was just floating.
It would blow up the stat books, pictures, everything. Like, it changes the entire game. It's absurd.
Yeah.
I don't think that it was ever seriously considered.
No.
Someone probably made it as a joke, and it's like, oh yeah.
Well, I think Rob Manfred mentioned it in a podcast.
Way.
He mentioned it in a podcast.
It's the most insane thing I've ever heard of in my life.
Like, the general question, I think, was something along the lines of,
most insane.
are you open to doing more rules? Yeah. I open to doing more rule changes, and I think he floated that as an example of...
Listen, I'm not a purist. I'm all for changing rules. I love the pitch clock. All that. The golden
don't be stupid.
Thing. Do it in the All-Star game, fine, but not in the regular season.
Right.
I mean, that's insane. I mean, imagine, like, so Shohei's up, you strike him out, and like, oh shit, I gotta face him again.
Right.
Like, you can't, like, it's insane.
Wait, what would be the rule?
So the rule is... Yeah, the rule is that, so they're calling it the golden at bat. I don't know if Rob Manfred actually said that, but the idea is that there would be some time during the game where you can pinch hit a person for someone else.
No, didn't even say pinch hit, like you just give them another at bat.
Yeah, and that person who's pinch hitting would not be pulled out of the game. They could, so for instance, if you had one guy like Shohei Ohtani, he could pinch hit for the guy before or after him and then have his regular at-bat, so he would essentially hit twice.
Right, so if it's like the bottom of the ninth and there's two guys on and you're down by a run, you can just pick whoever the hell you want to bat.
Yeah.
Which is just nuts.
Yeah.
It's insane.